The SUV looked normal except for a sour smell that didn't match fast food or dog. Silver crossover, quick turn tag on the dash, clean enough that sales could already imagine a family in it. I was already irritated, short-staffed, behind schedule, manager barking about speed, like we were flipping burgers. I ran the vacuum along the seat rails, and that smell kept lifting out of the carpet like it was trapped under the padding. Not rot, not cigarettes, more like wet metal and old sweat, the kind of scent that coats your tongue. I checked for spills, checked under the seats, even sniffed the cup holders like a psycho. Nothing. Trade-ins are always nasty in new ways, so I kept going. I pulled the mats, shook them, slapped them back. When I grabbed the rear cargo mat, it sat too flat, too perfect, like somebody had laid it back down with care. Most people don't line that stuff up. They toss it. I lifted it and popped the spare tire compartment. Fresh black duct tape ran across the foam insert in one straight strip. Not factory, not anything we'd do. The edges were rubbed down hard, like whoever put there had time and patience and didn't want fibers catching. I peeled it up and my stomach dropped. Inside sat zip bags, labeled in Sharpie with dates and city abbreviations. Neat handwriting, all caps. Each bag held little things. A torn earring back, a snap nail, a cheap motel key card, a clump of hair tied with a rubber band. One had a broken tooth in it. I didn't realize what it was until I turned the bag and saw the root. Trophy shit. The kind of collection that isn't about money. Under the bags was a folded printout. Missing adult posters, 3 faces, all from different states, all circled. Someone had drawn little arrows and notes like it was a fucking project. My hands went cold and my brain went dumb, like it wanted to pretend it wasn't real. I shut the hatch, opened it again, checked if I'd imagined it, then grabbed the whole foam insert like it was a live animal and carried it into the detail office. I should have taken a photo, but my phone was in my locker and my first thought wasn't evidence. It was get this away from the car before someone hides it. I kept picturing a hand sliding in, grabbing the bags, and leaving me holding nothing but paranoia. I set it on my manager's desk. He looked down, and the first thing he did wasn't ask what it was. He got angry at me. "What the fuck are you doing?" he snapped. He glanced at the open door, then down at the bags again, then back to me like I'd embarrassed him. "It was under the spare," I said. "This isn't normal." He didn't touch the bags. He pointed at the foam insert like it was a bomb and told me to stop touching things, to stop creating liability, to put it back and finish the detail. He said liability like it was a spell. Then he reached for it. Not gentle, like he was confiscating contraband. I pulled it back. "No," I said, and my voice cracked. "This is cops. Right now." His eyes flashed, and he leaned in close enough that I could smell his coffee breath. He hissed that I was trying to be a hero and that I was going to ruin the whole fucking store. He said if I called anyone, it would be on me when lawyers crawl up our ass. Paperwork. That's what scared him, not the bags. He tried again to take it. Harder. He didn't say we'll call. He said he'd handle it. In that quiet tone that means shut up and obey. That's when I realized I couldn't trust the office. I backed out with a foam insert and walked straight outside, half running, hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it on the asphalt. I called police and waited by the dumpster where the cameras didn't cover much. I hated that choice immediately, standing behind a dealership with a pile of trash, guarding plastic bags like I was in a bad movie, but I didn't want to be inside when he started handling things. I kept my back to the wall and watched the bay doors. He came out running. He bolted to the bay, yanked open the SUV, slammed the doors, and started the engine. No hositashchen. He tried to roll it out like he could erase the last 10 minutes by moving it 10 feet. I jogged after him yelling, nothing smart, just noise. He stared through the windshield like I was a problem he could drive through. For a second, I thought he was going to pin me between cars. A patrol car slid in and blocked the exit, lights flashing off windshields. My manager braked hard and jumped out with his hands up, already wearing his confused businessman face. He started talking fast about how we're just a dealership and we get trade-ins and employees mess around. I cut in and pointed at the foam insert on the pavement. I found this under the spare. He tried to take it. He tried to drive the car away. The cop's eyes flicked to the missing posters, and his face shifted into that tired shit look. He told my manager to step back. My manager laughed like it was a misunderstanding and tried to crowd the officer anyway. The officer put a hand out, and my manager actually flinched. More cops showed up. People in the showroom pressed their faces to the glass. A sales guy came out holding his phone like he was filming. My manager snapped at him to get inside, suddenly caring about optics. They asked for the keys. He stalled. He said the paperwork was inside. He kept trying to steer it into, maybe it's the previous owner's personal stuff, like that made harmless. The cops didn't buy it. They searched anyway. They popped the rear panel and found more. A cheap prepaid phone taped inside, a list of plate numbers, and a rag that stank like old sweat and something metallic. When they pulled out the phone, I watched my manager's throat work like he was swallowing back bile. That was the first time his anger slipped and fear showed through. He stopped talking. He just stared at the evidence bags like he was doing math he didn't like. They bagged everything, took photos, asked me exactly what I touched, asked what time I started my shift. I told them every step because I didn't want the story to get muddy. My manager kept trying to wedge himself into the conversation, correcting little details like he could control the narrative by nitpicking. Finally, one cop told him, flat, to shut up. They towed the SUV as evidence. The tow truck hooked it and lifted the rear like it weighed nothing. My manager watched it go with his arms crossed, jaw clenched, staring at me whenever the cops weren't looking. Not, I'm mad. More like, I know you now. And then the lot just kept going. Sales turned the open sign back on. A customer walked in and got greeted like it was any other day. Somebody in the bay laughed and said, "True crime," like it was a podcast and not 3 circled faces on paper. Next morning, I got fired for policy violations. Not for being wrong, for making a mess. They slid a form across the desk and said I tampered with customer property, caused a scene, endangered the business. My manager sat there and nodded like he was watching a training video. He kept calling it the incident, like the actual crime was my phone call. I asked if he was also going to fire himself for trying to drive evidence off the lot. He smiled like I told a joke and said I was confused and emotional. He didn't even have to raise his voice. He just treated me like my eyes couldn't be trusted. The dealership stayed open like nothing happened. Their socials kept posting new inventory. I called the detective number the cops gave me and got voicemail. I called again and got voicemail again. That afternoon, an unknown number called twice and hung up. When I walked to the corner store, a silver SUV idled at the curb with the windows up and the engine ticking like it had nowhere to be. It rolled off the second. I turned my head, slow, like it didn't care if I noticed. I checked my peephole for the rest of the day. I kept replaying my manager's eyes when the prepaid phone came out, like he'd recognized it. I didn't sleep that night. I just listened for the elevator and told myself I was being dramatic. I started checking my locks twice and flinching at every footstep in the hallway because now my brain had a new category of fear. People who collect you in pieces. I kept thinking about that key card in the bag. How somebody took it, wiped it clean, and still kept it. Like a souvenir and a promise. That night, someone slid an envelope under my apartment door. No knock, just a soft scrape of paper against the carpet outside my unit. I froze on my couch with my shoes still on because I'd started doing that after work, like shoes could buy me seconds. I waited for footsteps, heard nothing. The silence felt intentional. I cracked the door and saw a plain white envelope. No stamp, no name, placed dead center like a delivery. I snatched it, slammed the door, and shoved the deadbolt over so hard it clicked twice. Inside was my termination paper and one of those motel key cards from the bag, cleaned, wiped, and placed there like a fucking wink. The first hour was just the usual. People half asleep, dryers thumping, my boss texting, "Don't sit." Around 2 a.m., a guy came in with one towel and no laundry bag. He didn't load a machine. He walked the aisles like he was counting exits. He watched me fix a jam change machine and smiled like he'd learned something. That smile didn't look friendly. It looked like he just figured out where the weak part of the door is, like he owned the fucking floor plan already, and I was the slow one. I work nights at a laundromat off a road where the streetlights skip whole chunks of sidewalk, and the job is usually just noise and chores you do on autopilot. Dryer 3 thumps like a bad heartbeat. Washer 8 screeches on spin. The change machine makes that tired whine, and everyone treats it like it's a vending god. You get used to people being weird in small ways. You do not get used to someone coming in with nothing to wash and eyes that never land on the washers. He paused by the fire exit. He glanced at the front door. He stared at the blind corner where the detergent shelf blocks the camera. He watched me open the backroom door to reset the stupid machine, and I felt my brain go, oh, cool. He's not watching me. He's watching my routine. He left without spending a dime, towel still dry, and I stood there with my hands smelling like metal quarters and lint, telling myself not to be dramatic while my stomach sat heavy like a rock. He started showing up every night, same towel, same slow lap. He waited until the place emptied. Then he'd shove quarters into the machine until it stuck again. I'd hear the clunk, see the red error light, and he'd tilt his head toward the back room like it was a suggestion. I told my boss. He called me dramatic and said, just keep the door locked. Great advice, except I needed the back room key to reset the breaker when machines tripped. And that back room isn't some safe little office. It's a narrow hallway that smells like bleach and old mop water, with a breaker box on the wall and a light you turn on with a dangling cord because the pull chain snapped months ago and nobody fixed it. You don't hear the front door chime from in there if the dryers are running. You don't see the camera feed from in there. You're just alone with the hum of machines on the other side of a cheap door. My boss didn't care about any of that. He cared about the register and his don't sit bullshit. I asked for a second person on nights, and he laughed. I asked for a camera aimed at the hallway, and he said cameras are expensive. I asked if I could keep the backroom door locked, and he said customers complain when stuff isn't accessible, like random strangers need access to my back hallway at 2 a.m. The second night, the guy timed it better. He waited until the last customer rolled out, then fed quarters in with this steady rhythm, not even looking at the slot, just listening for the clunk. When the light blinked red, he didn't complain, didn't wave me over, didn't act annoyed. He just angled his chin toward the back like, go on. I tried to stall. I wiped the counter twice. I checked dryers that didn't need checking. I pretended to look for the spare key, even though it was on my wrist. He stood there and waited, calm as a statue, eyes flicking between the hallway and my key ring like he was counting seconds. I hated that I still went back there. I hated that my brain tried to rationalize it, like it was safer to just fix it fast than to let him linger. That logic is how people end up in fucking news stories. By the third night, he started drifting closer. He'd slide behind the dryer row where the overhead camera doesn't catch your face if you keep your head down. He'd stand there while I pulled lint, while I refilled the soap dispenser, while I swept, like he was learning exactly how long I stayed crouched and how many seconds my back was turned. He never touched me. That was the trick. No obvious crime, just pressure. Just this steady push toward being alone with him, somewhere the cameras don't help. I started changing little things, not because I thought it would stop him, but because doing nothing made me feel insane. I looped the keys around my wrist tight, enough it left a mark. I moved my purse behind the counter and stopped leaving my wallet anywhere I couldn't feel it. I taped over my name tag and scribbled something else, like that mattered, like he couldn't just wait and read it when the tape peeled. I kept telling myself I was being smart, but it felt like I was building a tiny shrine to fear in my own workplace, and my boss would still text me, don't sit, like posture was the real risk here. On the fourth night, he brought a coffee and set it on the folding table by my purse. I didn't touch it. I tossed it. He didn't get mad. That calm made my skin crawl. The kind of calm that says he's not here to flirt. He's not here to impress me. He's here to see what I do when he crosses a line. Most people would have snapped or called me a bitch. He just watched, like me throwing it out was the answer to a question I didn't know I was taking. He waited until I bent to pull lint from a trap. Then he slipped behind me, so close I felt heat off him. I stood up fast, and he bumped my shoulder like an accident, then murmured my name. He'd read it off my stupid little name tag. My whole body went cold. I didn't get a dramatic rush of courage. I got this ugly, animal certainty that he'd been building to that moment, night by night. And now he was close enough that if I froze wrong, I'd end up in that back hallway, and no one would hear me. I backed up hard enough to rattle the lint bin, and it rolled across the tile loud as hell. He didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised. He just stood there, steady, like he'd finally confirmed I was paying attention. I grabbed my phone, stepped behind the counter, and hit the emergency call button we weren't supposed to use. He moved toward the back hallway anyway. I didn't chase him. Fuck no. I didn't even step out from behind the counter. I kept my eyes on his hands because hands tell the truth. I saw his hand holding a thin plastic strip, one of those Jimmy tools, already bent, already ready. He wasn't improvising. He practiced. He didn't wave it around. He didn't threaten me with it. He just had it there like it was as normal as his towel, like he'd done this in 100 places and the routine always worked because workers always go fix the jam, workers always go into the back, workers always do what they're trained to do. I stayed put and kept talking to dispatch, voice shaking, try not to cry because crying felt like giving him another little win. The cops rolled in and he walked out the front like nothing happened. They didn't catch him. He didn't run. He didn't stumble. He didn't look back. He just stepped past the arriving cruiser like he belonged outside too, like he could slide right out of consequences the same way he'd been trying to slide me into the back. I pointed like an idiot, kept saying towel guy, like that's a description that matters. The cops did the slow look around thing, like maybe he'd teleport back in. They did find the strip under the vending machine, tucked like he'd done this before and would do it again. Not dropped, tucked, placed like a bookmark for next time. One cop held it up with a pen and asked if he threatened me, if he touched me, like those are the only two boxes that matter. I told him he got close enough that I felt his breath, and he used my name, and he had a tool in his hand, and he wanted me in the back room. And the cop nodded like, yep, that sucks, and wrote it down anyway. My boss showed up after they called him, and he came in pissed, not worried, like I'd interrupted his sleep for nothing. He asked if the cops made a scene. He asked if I threw out the coffee because free is free. He told me not to start shit that scares customers. I wanted to scream at him that I was the customer too, in a way, because I was the one trapped there, but I didn't have the energy to argue with a man who thinks danger is bad for business, but fine for me. After that night, every sound in the laundromat felt sharp. The door chime spiked my pulse. The clunk of quarters made my stomach drop. I checked washer reflections like a habit and stopped taking the trash out after midnight. I didn't see him again in the laundromat, and for about 12 hours, I almost let myself relax. Like maybe he'd gotten spooked by the cops and moved on. People always say, at least nothing happened. Like the point of threat is whether you have bruises at the end. The point is he learned me. He learned my hours, my keys, my back room, my name. And he left that strip tucked under the vending machine like a promise that he'd be back when it was quieter, when my boss's stupid don't sit policy put me on my feet and distracted, when nobody would believe me because nothing happened. 2 days later, my bus pass went missing from my wallet. Nothing else, just the pass, my route, my times, my habit, stolen so clean it felt like a promise. I didn't kick doors or carry weapons. I just sat at a desk and waited for people to get wrecked by life. Then I slid in with a calm voice and a fake badge graphic. I didn't even need some genius scheme. Death already does the work. Obituaries, funeral home posts, Facebook updates where a cousin types, please share, and throws a donation link in the comments. I scraped names, dates, the little details people add when they're bleeding out in public. I copied funeral home names, learned the right phrases, sent forms that looked official. People thanked me while I drained them. That's the sick part. Gratitude makes theft feel clean. I ran it like a job because that's how you make yourself feel normal. I had a cheap strip mall office with beige walls and a printer that jammed if you breathed wrong. I wore a lanyard. I kept my voice steady. I didn't sound excited because excited sounds like a scam. I sounded tired and helpful, like I've been dealing with grief all day. I had templates. I had a little support email with a signature block that looked corporate enough to stop questions before they started. I kept spreadsheets, not just names, how they sounded, who cried, who got angry, who asked questions. I wrote down tells like it was a poker game. If someone got mad fast, I marked them as waste. If someone apologized a lot, I marked them as repeat. I wish I could say I hated myself for that. I didn't. I liked the control. I liked that I could push a person with a sentence like pressing a bruise. The ones with kids were the easiest and also the worst. They'd say they couldn't afford the service, and their voice would do that thin thing like they were trying not to fall apart. I didn't back off. I leaned in. I said all the right soft words. Then I asked for photos for the memorial page. I asked for the kid's name so I could personalize the tribute. I told them the donation total would unlock matching funds, like grief with some app with a reward system. If they hesitated, I nudged harder. I'd tell them the window was closing, that the fund had a deadline, that they'd regret waiting. I'd steer them into begging. I watched them beg strangers for help. Then I took the help and let them think nobody cared. I'd refresh the pages and read the comments while the money stacked up. People writing, "I'm so sorry. Wish I could do more. Praying for you." And I'd take it anyway. That's what makes me feel like a real piece of shit when I'm honest. Not the stealing. The fact that I could read love in plain text and still treat it like loose change on a counter. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone directly because the service was already expensive, because life was already unfair, because they were already desperate. That's how I stayed calm. I built excuses like walls. If the walls held, I could keep working. Most victims moved like I expected. They cried, they argued, they gave up, they paid. A few got suspicious, and I'd switch tactics. I'd act offended. I'd act professional. I'd act like they were wasting my time. I'd drop words like verification and policy and processing because those words shut people up. People will let you rob them if you sound like you're following a procedure. The first time I felt something like fear was when a woman I hit twice didn't plead. She didn't beg. She didn't try to bargain. She didn't call me names. She sent me a screenshot of my own donation page, then a second screenshot of my real name under the domain registration. My actual name, not a fake agent name. It sat there like a knife on a table. My stomach dropped so hard I had to grab the edge of my desk. My hands started sweating onto the keyboard. I tried to do what I always did. I tried to type a calm reply. I tried to act like it was a misunderstanding. I tried to pull the policy bullshit. I deleted every draft because none of it fit. You can't sound official when somebody's holding your throat in one hand and proof in the other. She didn't threaten me. She didn't say she was calling the cops. She didn't even say she wanted the money back. She just wrote that she hoped I'd live long enough to remember every voice. That line messed me up because it wasn't anger. It was focus. It was a person who'd been cracked open and found something sharp inside. I stared at it and felt my brain searching for a way out like a rat in a box. I checked my accounts, checked my other pages, checked everything like she'd infected my whole setup. I told myself she was bluffing, that she didn't really have me. But she already had me. She'd moved past the part where people ask for mercy. She was in the part where they make you understand. A week later, she showed up in person at the strip mall office where I worked under a temp badge. I didn't even know how she found it at first. I was halfway through some email, coffee going cold, when I felt that weird pressure like someone was standing too close. I looked up and saw her by the vending machines in the hallway. She didn't walk around or pretend to browse. She just stood there and stared straight through the glass at me. No jilling, no scene, no phone out recording, no dramatic bullshit. Just that stare that said she'd already decided what I was. My throat went tight. My heart slammed like I'd been caught stealing with my hand still in the drawer. I tried to move my mouse and my hand shook. I tried to keep my face neutral like I didn't know her, like she was a random customer. But my body didn't listen. Sweat broke out under my arms. My mouth tasted like metal. I wanted to stand up and tell her to get the fuck out. I wanted to call security. I wanted to act like the victim. I wanted to laugh, because laughter is what you do when you don't know what else to do. I couldn't do any of it, because she wasn't there to argue. She wasn't there to negotiate. She was there to make sure I knew she could cross the distance between a screen and my life whenever she wanted. And the worst part was I didn't know what she'd do next, because she didn't need to do anything right then. She'd already won the moment. She made me feel small in my own little office. I sat there while she watched me, and something in my chest twisted hard like a hook in my throat. I realized I'd spent all this time picking people because they were messy, because grief made them soft, because grief made them confused. And here was a person whose grief made her clear. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't out-talk it. I couldn't process it away. I quit that day and burned the phone. Not in some symbolic movie way. I just panicked like a coward. I grabbed my bag and walked out like the carpet was on fire. I didn't tell anyone why. I didn't clean up. I didn't even shut down properly. I drove home shaking, checking mirrors like she was behind me, even though I was the one who'd been hunting people. I got to my place, ripped the SIM out, snapped it, tossed it in the sink. I took the phone to a dumpster behind a grocery store and threw it in with the trash like it was alive. Then I wiped my laptop and deleted everything, hands moving fast, brain screaming that it wasn't fast enough. I tell myself I stopped because I grew a conscience. Bullshit. I stopped because I finally met someone whose grief turned into focus, and it felt like a hook in my throat. Sometimes I still hear those thank yous when I'm trying to sleep, and I don't feel guilt first. I feel annoyed. That's how I know I'm not the victim in my own story.